Hello, my name is Dr. Shane Martin, and in this lecture series, I'll be going over vaccines. I know this is a very touchy subject. I know there are many documentaries for and against vaccines. I've certainly read my number of books and watched my number of documentaries on vaccines and done my own research. And so what I've put together, I would like to share with my patients. So when we talk about vaccines, the number one thing we're concerned with is our child's safety. That's the one thing everyone can agree on, hopefully at least, is the safety of our children. What are the best things that we can do to ensure their health and longevity? So one thing I'll mention is first off that there are vaccines that do work. So my position is not that all vaccines are unhealthy or dangerous. There certainly are ones out there that do work, and we'll talk about that. And there are certainly things that can be done to protect our children from diseases that supposedly vaccines are supposed to protect us from. And my objective here is not to tell people what they should do or what they should not do. My objective in this series is simply to provide information. Now, information is power. The things that we're ignorant on are the things that will cause us fear and anxiety, are certainly things that others can use to control us. So first off, I would like to go over the quick and the dirty. What exactly is a vaccine? What does it do? So what a vaccine does is it educates the body as to what a pathogen is. So before the body can actually get rid of a virus or a parasite or a bacterial infection, the body needs to recognize it as a pathogen or actually as a disease. So what a vaccine does is it takes an attenuated or weakened version of the, let's say, the virus, and it introduces it to the body. That's called an antigen. And the body recognizes the weakened form and then produces antibodies, or you might say soldier cells, cells that will, or proteins that will go and destroy and kill the pathogen or the virus or the disease. And in the future, then it produces memory cells. So hopefully in the future, when the body is infected with the same pathogen, the body will be able to recognize it and destroy it quickly. So there's also in the vaccine, so first off, there's the antigen, the weakened version of, let's say, the virus. And there are also compounds that are supposed to stimulate the immune system. So sometimes we need to kind of wake up the immune system when a vaccine is injected. Otherwise, the vaccine won't do anything. And thirdly, this is a different type where antibodies are actually injected into the body. The antibodies that are supposed to target that specific virus. So if your body hasn't produced the antibodies yet, then they can simply be passively injected into your body. So if you don't have a immunity to, let's say, I don't know, the common flu, then the antibodies injected in your body should take care of the flu if you've been infected. So let's first address the fear factor. So there's a lot of fear when it comes to this subject that keep people from even wanting to, or even being open to having this conversation. So first off, there's the fear that if vaccines are taken away, then the preventable diseases that would otherwise be kept at bay, like polio and smallpox, would suddenly decimate our population and maybe harm our children. So there's that fear. And then there's the other fear that these vaccines, not only are they not keeping away these preventable diseases, but they're actually causing harm to our children. So again, the one thing we have in common is we want our children to be safe. Let's not let fear control us in this conversation. You think of COVID. During COVID, people were taking the COVID vaccine out of a sense of fear, out of a sense of social pressure, even shaming, even the fear of losing their jobs. And after the fact, we found that not only was the COVID vaccine not helpful, and even that in some cases actually causing COVID, but in many cases it was actually causing a lot of harm, blood clotting, cancer, and in the military was forced to take vaccines, and neuropathies went up 10,000% in the military. ICD-10 codes increased from 1 million to 20 million, and many types of cancer dramatically increased as well. So I don't want fear to be a factor in this conversation, rather just information. Let's see what the facts are. So let's go a little bit into the history of vaccines. So the father of vaccines is considered to be Louis Pasteur, a doctor or a scientist from France. Now, the data shows that when vaccines were initially instituted in both France and England, people who were inoculated for, let's say, typhoid or tuberculosis, actually, many of them ended up getting the disease that they were being inoculated against. In fact, there was a large outcry when animals were being inoculated for, let's say, tuberculosis or various diseases, because the animals inoculated and ended up dying. And so now the question is, if in the initial state the vaccines didn't work, why do we still use them today? Well, during that time, Louis Pasteur was very good friends with Napoleon, so he had quite a bit of political clout. So the scientists, the medical institutions at that time were very hesitant to contradict or to even hold Pasteur accountable because of his political clout and his very, I guess you might say, aggressive personality. During the Spanish flu, during the influenza, the Great Influenza, even before the Great Influenza, during World War I, soldiers, especially American soldiers, were inoculated against typhoid. Now, what ended up happening was that the soldiers were inoculated against typhoid. They ended up getting typhoid anyways, or the disease altered or changed. So a second vaccine was needed for I forget what it's called, typhoid, maybe A. And after that, the germ was able to evolve again, and so a third vaccine was needed for all three types of pathogens. And so it's been surmised that the Great Influenza outbreak actually came from these germs actually mutating and changing and evolving due to the inoculation. So it's possible that the Spanish flu, which killed around 26 to 30 million people worldwide, was actually due to mismanaged vaccines. Now, in 2010, we have another scientist, Dr. Wakefield. Dr. Wakefield did some research, and he was able to correlate the connection between the MMR vaccine and autism in the African American community. So rather than researching this further, the Dr. Wakefield actually ended up losing his medical license, and any research further in this matter was curtailed. So there is that danger. And we'll talk more about it as we continue. Now let's look at chronic illness in America. It's in general. So since as vaccines have increased from 4 to 5 to now I think it's like 21 vaccines for a child, ages maybe 1 to 9, as that increases, so the um, autoimmune diseases, the chronic diseases, in fact, autism has dramatically increased, dyslexia, even allergies. So a lot of mothers will notice that their children more and more and more are allergic to food, or they're allergic to the let's say like peanuts or milk or gluten, things that they haven't been allergic to before. To understand the food itself has been contaminated and altered, but there's also a problem with the immune system. So again, what the vaccine does, again, you have your innate immune system, which is the part of the immune system you're born with, but then you have your adaptive immune system. It's the part of the immune system is sort of like artificial intelligence. It's able to recognize or find ways to recognize new types of viruses or pathologies. Now the problem is if the adaptive immune system is heightened, then the immune system can actually begin attacking the body itself. And that's why we have autoimmune diseases and autistic diseases as well. So growing up, and especially in school or in college, I always heard about the polio vaccine or the smallpox vaccine, how it eradicated these diseases for the world. So let's look at the polio vaccine. There's a lot to talk about it, but one thing I'll mention very briefly is the way polio was diagnosed changed. So, for instance, if someone after World War II, someone was diagnosed with polio based on their symptoms. Maybe they had atrophy in their muscles and their legs or their arms or their other symptoms. Um, Now, after they received the polio vaccine, um, if you had polio, you'd have to go through intensive lab work and other diagnostic tests before they would diagnose you with polio. So by simply changing how polio was diagnosed, they could say they eradicated polio by maybe 60 or 80%. And not only that, they also changed the nomenclature. So for instance, you have the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and several years ago, they decided to um, vaccinate thousands of children in one country in Africa. Now, the problem is, after these children were vaccinated with polio, they actually end up getting polio. In fact, they did the same thing in India. In fact, Bill Gates, if he were to go to India, he'd be arrested by the Indian government for the thousands and thousands of children, over I think it was 10,000 children who actually received polio due to his vaccine program. Anyways, so and back to Africa. So the children um, who had polio before the vaccine, it was called polio A, for instance. And those who had polio after the vaccine it was called polio B or some other pathology. And so then Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation were able to say that they eradicated 100% of polio A. That's because instead of polio A, the children were getting polio B, that is the polio from the vaccine itself. And then you also look at the flu vaccine. You hear about the flu vaccine all the time, and you're also encouraged to get it every year. The problem is, many times the studies they've done have actually shown that in some cases, those who got the flu vaccine were more likely to get the flu after getting the vaccine. Not all the time, but in some years. And we'll talk a little bit more about the actual ingredients that are in or at least were in the flu vaccine. So, what is in a vaccine? That's a very good question. And this is not something that your medical doctor will tell you. And if you, unfortunately, even if you look on the ingredients list, a lot of these things you're not going to find. So the first thing, one of the first, and again, the ingredients here aren't in every single vaccine. There, there, depends on the vaccine. So the first thing a lot of times you'll find in the vaccine is formaldehyde. Formaldehyde is used as a preservative, and formaldehyde is extremely toxic. Um, Another thing you'll find is methyl mercury. So mercury is the most neurotoxic substance found in nature. And not only is it toxic, but they methylate it. That is, they make it organic so that the body can absorb it more. And the levels of this methyl mercury found in the vaccine, if you were to inject it into a cup of water and drink it, it would be contrary to the environmental guidelines. So, according to environmental guidelines, the mercury in that water would be considered undrinkable. And yet, you take this highly neurotoxic, highly concentrated, methyl mercury, and you inject it directly into the veins of your children. That does not sound good to me. Another thing that you may find in the vaccine is aborted baby tissue. Years ago, they used cell lines from aborted baby tissue, and they used that in ingredients in vaccines. So from an ethical perspective, I wouldn't be too thrilled with that. And I'll get back to that as well. But then lastly, one ingredient, there's many ingredients that definitely scare me, or I shouldn't use the word scare, but concern me. But also you have protein cells from infected monkeys. What they do is they'll take an animal, they'll infect it with, let's say, a virus or a pathogen, and hopefully that animal, in this case the monkey, will produce well, at least you'll have the pathogen in the monkey, and so uh, um, the spleen or the kidneys are harvested from the monkey, and then a weakened version of that pathogen is put into the vaccines. Now the problem is these proteins putrefy. And they did a study before years and years ago for TB vaccines. If you were to take the proteins from the vaccine, and without anything else, just the proteins from the vaccine, and they would inject it into animals, those animals would actually get tuberculosis simply from the proteins, because the proteins are putrefying and they actually act as a toxin and harms the host that it's injected into. So those are 4 concerns that I have for the general vaccine. So what was actually in the COVID vaccine? There's 3 things I'm familiar with. Well, first thing is when I looked at the ingredient list, I didn't see much that concerned me. But one thing that really concerned me was the aborted fetal tissue. So the aborted fetal tissue, obviously ethically, I have issues with that. Also, the proteins will putrefy and cause issues in the host. Now, some scientists in Spain were able to get hold of a sample of the vaccine. They put under a microscope, an electron microscope. They found that over 80% of the active ingredients were something called graphene oxide. Graphene oxide is a nanoparticle-like substance that can be controlled or manipulated by outside frequencies or stimulation. And it's possible that these are what contributed to the blood clotting that was notoriously found in those who passed away after having COVID. And then thirdly, the mRNA technology is a big concern. The mRNA technology can actually go into the cell and actually alter the DNA of the host. And on this basis, the COVID vaccine actually wasn't a vaccine itself. By vaccine, the definition of what a vaccine is, but it's neither here nor there. So those are three things that I've come to understand were in the COVID vaccine. So vaccines are a huge cash cow for the pharmaceutical companies. In fact, during the pandemic, or the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, many CEOs were turned into billionaires overnight. Now, in the medical world, especially in the health research departments, it's taboo to say anything that'd be negative towards vaccines. In fact, many researchers who have found or questioned, found problems with the vaccines, either they lost their licenses or they lost their funding. And so people in the professional community are highly incentivized, both professionally and monetarily, to say nothing ill in regards to the vaccine industry. But then we also have this psychological welfare. So the pharmaceutical company is certainly the biggest drug cartel. In fact, I believe it's the envy of the Mexican or the Colombian drug cartels. I mean, imagine having a product that is part of the institutions of your country, and everyone's forced to, or highly incentivized to buy or use your product. If you were in charge of that company, you'd be extremely wealthy. So then, how do they control us? Well, they certainly hide the information. It's very hard to find any information on vaccines. They use fear. If you question their protocols, then you're told you're putting your child's life or your own life at risk. And if that doesn't do it, if you're a professional, then they'll certainly smear you. They'll call you an anti-vaxxer. I think of where the term what is it? Conspiracists, the conspiracy theorists. That term first came from the CIA in regards to people who question the narrative regarding the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And it seems more and more these days the difference between reality and a conspiracy theory is somewhere between 6 weeks or 6 months. And not only so, if you question, or if you question the vaccine narrative, or if you don't have allow your children to have vaccines, then you tend to lose freedom or privileges in society. So there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of control, there's a lot of shaming in order to get this product into your child's arm or into your arm. So the big question as parents is, what do we do? If vaccines are not only not helpful, but possibly even harmful to our children, what do we do to protect our children? So the biggest thing is nutrition. If you're able to keep your child in a heightened state of nutrition, the majority of diseases, flus, viruses, various pathologies, parasites, you'll be able to stave off these infections with high doses of nutrition. What I do for myself, what I recommend for my patients, is the moringa plant. The leaf is harvested, and the leaf itself has more vitamin A than carrots, more vitamin C than oranges, all the amino acids you need. In fact, if you take this powder, then you pretty pretty much don't need to take any other supplements in terms of nutrition. Now, in terms of the addressing specific pathologies, let's say the flu, there are homeopathic nosodes. So actually vaccines, the philosophy of vaccines actually come from homeopathy, where the like cures like. So the homeopathic nosode takes an attenuated version of that specific, let's say, bacteria or that flu or that mold, and it makes a medicine, or it makes a remedy that the child can take, and it'll keep off that infection or that pathology. And another option is oral vaccines. So I'm definitely not interested in putting a vaccine into my bloodstream, but you can certainly take certain vaccines, take them orally, and the gut lining will help protect you from the harmful compounds that are actually in the vaccine. So there's certainly many things I would do before I'd even consider at least putting a vaccine in my children's arm. So an unvaccinated child, quite ironically, is actually typically, more than not, a very healthy child, assuming they're getting the nutrition that they need. So the children who are vaccinated, many of them actually have autistic symptoms. In fact, I talk with teachers, elementary teachers, and they tell me that they'll have children they've known for months come in, and they're just not engaging. They're quiet. They're staring off into space. And the teachers realize, and they know that that child had just had their vaccine. When they check in with their parents, they're absolutely right. The child had just had their vaccine. And there's inflammation that's actually going on in their nervous system. And not only so, but the pediatricians who give vaccines are aware of this. In fact, over 20% of pediatricians don't vaccinate their own children. And I'll just admit, I have 2 children. We have not vaccinated either of them, and they are extremely healthy and absolutely wonderful. So lastly, let's just talk about sources. So what can we do? Where can we get more information? How can we educate ourselves? How can we become less of a tool of corporations and companies, especially pharmaceutical companies, who are more interested in our money than in our health or in our welfare? So I have a list of documentaries that I would definitely recommend. You can watch. There's a Shot in the Dark, which is a very in-depth series into some of the main vaccines. It's done by Candace Owens. You can search that out on Facebook. And I'm sure many of you heard of the controversial documentary called Vax. I've watched that. It's excellent. There's many other ones as well. You can also watch the Plandemic. There's Plandemic 1, Plandemic 2, and it goes over just what went on behind the scenes during the COVID pandemic. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr., you can go to his websites. He's been excellent person when it comes to promoting the health and wishing to get rid of the toxicity in our pharmaceuticals as well as our food industry. So you can go to his website, and he has some health videos there. In terms of books, there's 2 books I'd recommend, and I actually have them. If anyone wishes me to send them a copy, I can certainly do that. The first book is called Rational Bacteriology. Goes over pasture and an alternative to the germ model, and swine flu expose. So ask me about those. I'll be glad to send them to you. So I hope this may have given you a little bit more information than you had before. I know it can be a very scary subject when we're talking about our child's health, but I believe there are excellent options out there that will keep our children healthy without having vaccines put into our children's arm.